Dying grizzly bear handed her cub to the human baby. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. In the dense forests of Montana, where sunlight struggled to pierce through ancient pines, Savannah Reed sat on her cabin porch, gently rocking her 6-month-old daughter, Maya. The baby's laughter echoed across the clearing, a melodic sound that seemed to make even the rustling leaves pause in appreciation. Savannah's husband, Connor, had left at dawn to gather supplies from the nearest town, leaving them alone in their peaceful isolation. Maya squirmed in her mother's arms, tiny fingers reaching toward something in the distance. Savannah followed her daughter's gaze and froze. At the edge of the clearing stood a massive grizzly bear, its fur matted with blood, eyes glazed with pain. Behind her, a tiny cub peeked out, frightened and confused. "Stay still, Maya," Savannah whispered, her heart pounding against her ribs. But Maya only giggled louder, her innocent eyes fixed on the bear cub with fascination. The mother bear swayed on her feet, clearly wounded and weakening fast. Blood dripped from a deep gash in her side, staining the wild grass beneath her massive paws. With labored breaths, she nudged her cub forward, toward the cabin, toward Maya. Savannah clutched her baby tighter, torn between running inside and staying frozen in place. The rational part of her brain screamed danger, but something in the bear's eyes, something almost human, made her pause. The grizzly took another step forward, then collapsed to her knees. With what seemed like her last strength, she pushed her cub completely away from her body, in the direction of the cabin. A low, rumbling sound escaped her throat, not threatening, but pleading. Was this dying mother entrusting her baby to them? The thought seemed impossible, yet Savannah couldn't deny what she was witnessing. The cub whimpered, trying to return to its mother, but the grizzly used the last of her strength to nudge it away again. In that moment, as human mother and bear mother locked eyes across the clearing, something profound and unspoken passed between them. And when Maya stretched her tiny hands toward the confused bear cub, Savannah knew their lives were about to change forever. The cub hesitated at the edge of the forest, whimpering as its mother's breathing grew more labored. Maya squirmed in Savannah's arms, reaching out with such insistence that Savannah had to tighten her grip. "What do I do?" Savannah whispered to herself, scanning the tree line for any sign of Connor returning. The cabin door was just 5 steps behind her, safety within reach, but the dying bear's eyes held her in place, silently pleading. A crack of a rifle shot suddenly echoed through the forest, startling birds into flight. The wounded grizzly flinched, her massive body shuddering. Savannah ducked instinctively, shielding Maya with her body. "Got one!" a gruff voice shouted from somewhere in the trees. "The big one's down already." Hunters. They must have been tracking the wounded bear. The cub, terrified by the gunshot, bolted from the tree line, not back into the forest, but straight toward the cabin porch. Before Savannah could react, it had scrambled under the wooden railing and pressed itself against the wall, trembling violently. Maya squealed with delight, reaching down toward the frightened creature. The cub looked up, its dark eyes meeting the baby's, and something inexplicable happened. It stopped trembling. 3 men emerged from the trees, rifles raised. The leader, a burly man with a red beard, spotted the fallen grizzly and grinned triumphantly. "Told you she wouldn't get far, bleeding like that." Then his eyes shifted to the porch, where Savannah stood frozen with Maya in her arms, and the bear cub cowering beside them. "Ma'am, step away from that cub," the hunter called, raising his rifle again. "It's dangerous. We'll take care of it." The mother bear, somehow still clinging to life, raised her massive head and let out a weak, plaintive roar. The cub responded with a whimper, pressing itself harder against the cabin wall. "Please," Savannah found herself saying, stepping in front of the cub. "Don't shoot. She's dying, and she brought her baby to us. She chose us." The hunters exchanged confused glances. "Bears don't do that, lady," the red-bearded man said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. As if to prove Savannah wrong, the cub suddenly moved. Not away from them, but closer to the porch steps. Its tiny paws made soft thumping sounds as it climbed up, approaching Maya with cautious curiosity. "Jesus," one of the hunters whispered, lowering his rifle slightly. Maya, oblivious to the danger or the tension, let out a delighted laugh as the cub sniffed at her dangling foot. The bear cub tilted its head at the sound, seemingly just as fascinated by the human baby as Maya was with it. The dying grizzly watched from the forest's edge, her eyes growing dimmer but never leaving her cub. With a final, tremendous effort, she rose to her feet, swayed, and then collapsed again. This time, her massive body went completely still. "Mama Bear's gone," the youngest hunter said quietly, removing his hat. The cub sensed its mother's passing. It let out a mournful cry that sent goosebumps racing across Savannah's skin. Maya, as if understanding the cub's pain, stopped laughing and looked at the little bear with wide, solemn eyes. Then, in a moment, Savannah would replay in her mind for years to come. Maya reached out her tiny hand and gently patted the cub's head. The cub didn't flinch or growl. Instead, it leaned into the baby's touch, its eyes closing briefly. The hunters stood transfixed, rifles now pointed at the ground, as witness to something none of them could explain. "I've never seen anything like this," the red-bearded hunter murmured, his earlier bravado replaced by wonder. It's like the bear knew what it was doing." A vehicle engine rumbled in the distance. Connor returning. The hunters tensed again, but Savannah raised her hand. "Please," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "That's my husband, and I think we need to honor this mother's last wish." Connor's truck skidded to a halt in front of the cabin, dust billowing around the tires. He leaped out, face pale with fear at the sight of the armed men standing near his wife and child. "Savannah," he shouted, rushing toward them before stopping abruptly as he spotted the bear cub, now sitting beside Maya on the porch. His mouth fell open, eyes darting between the hunters, the dead grizzly, and the impossible scene on his porch. "What the hell is happening here?" he demanded, instinctively reaching for the hunting knife at his belt. "Connor, wait," Savannah said, shifting Maya in her arms. Something incredible has happened." The red-bearded hunter stepped forward, rifle now slung over his shoulder. "Your wife's right, mister. I've been hunting these mountains for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. That mother bear—" He pointed to the fallen grizzly. She was mortally wounded, probably by a male grizzly, but instead of hiding her cub or dying with it, she brought it here, to your baby. Connor shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Bears don't—" "I know what I saw," Savannah interrupted firmly. "She looked me in the eyes, Connor. She chose us. She chose Maya." As if to confirm her words, the cub made a small whimpering sound and pressed closer to Maya's dangling feet. The baby gurgled happily, dropping her stuffed rabbit onto the cub's back. Instead of shying away, the cub simply glanced up at the toy, then back at Maya. "We can't keep a wild bear, Savannah," Connor said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's not a pet, it's dangerous." "I'm not saying we should keep it forever," Savannah replied, bouncing Maya gently as she began to fuss. "But we can't just just kill it or abandon it either. Not after what its mother did. The youngest hunter cleared his throat. There's a wildlife rehabilitation center about 50 miles south. They might take it. Connor ran a hand through his hair, visibly torn. And what do we do until then? What if it attacks Maya? As if understanding it was being discussed, the cub raised its head and made eye contact with Connor. There was such intelligence in those eyes, such vulnerability, that Connor found himself taking a step back. "Look at them, Connor," Savannah said softly. "Just look." Maya had dropped her stuffed rabbit again, and the cub had picked it up gently between its teeth, holding it up toward the baby. Maya's delighted squeal echoed across the clearing, and something in Connor's expression shifted. "This isn't normal," he muttered, but the edge had gone from his voice. "No," agreed the red-bearded hunter, "it surely isn't. But then again, maybe we don't know as much about these creatures as we think we do." A tense silence fell over the group, broken only by Maya's contented babbling and the cub's occasional whimpers. The hunters eventually agreed to help Connor transport the mother bear's body away from the cabin, laying her to rest in a secluded glen where scavengers wouldn't disturb her. That night, despite Connor's initial protests, the bear cub slept in a makeshift pen beside Maya's crib. Savannah woke every hour to check on them, only to find the same scene each time. Maya sleeping peacefully, one arm dangling through the crib bars, and the cub curled directly beneath her hand. "It's just until we can get it to the rehabilitation center," Connor said as dawn broke, watching the unlikely pair with uncertainty still clouding his eyes. Just for a day or two, but Savannah, watching how the cub's eyes followed Maya's every movement, wasn't so sure it would be that simple. Something extraordinary had happened in their clearing yesterday, something that defied explanation, and deep in her heart, she knew their story was just beginning. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center sent a representative the next day, a stern-faced woman named Dr. Eleanor West, who arrived in a mud-splattered Jeep, wearing an expression that suggested she didn't believe a word of the story she'd been told over the phone. "Bears don't give their cubs to humans," she stated flatly, setting down her equipment case in the living room. "It's anthropomorphizing to suggest otherwise. The mother was likely delirious from her injuries." But when Dr. West saw the cub, now named Willow by Maya, who had attempted to say wilderness and produced only the first syllable, her professional skepticism faltered. The cub was curled beside Maya's playmat, watching attentively as the baby stacked colorful blocks. When Maya knocked over her tower with a delighted giggle, the cub nudged a fallen block back toward her with its nose. "That's unusual behavior," Dr. West admitted, kneeling to observe them more closely. "How long has it been here?" "Just since yesterday," Savannah answered, hovering nearby. "We've been feeding it the formula you recommended over the phone." Dr. West nodded absently, her attention fixed on the interaction before her. When Maya began to fuss, apparently frustrated with her blocks, the cub made a soft humming sound and gently pushed its head against her tiny hand. Maya immediately stopped crying, patting the cub's head instead. "In my 20 years of wildlife biology, I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. West said finally, standing up. "The cub appears to be about 4 months old, still dependent on its mother. At this age, it should be afraid of humans, not comforting them." "So, you believe us now?" Connor asked, leaning against the doorframe. "About the mother bear bringing it to us?" Dr. West hesitated. "I believe something extraordinary happened, yes. But the question remains, what's best for this cub now?" That question hung in the air as Dr. West conducted her examination. The cub was healthy despite its mother's condition, showing no signs of injury or malnourishment. But when Dr. West tried to coax it into a transport cage, the cub backed away, retreating to Maya's side with a distressed whine. "This complicates things," Dr. West said, frowning. "Normally, I'd take it to our facility immediately. Cubs this young can't survive alone in the wild. But the attachment it's formed. What if it stayed here just for a little while?" Savannah suggested, surprised by the hope in her own voice. "You could teach us how to care for it properly, and when it's ready, when it's less frightened, you could take it then." Dr. West raised an eyebrow. "You want to temporarily foster a grizzly bear cub?" "Is that even legal?" Connor asked. "Not typically, no," Dr. West admitted, "but I could potentially authorize it as a special case. A temporary emergency placement until the cub is stable enough for rehabilitation." She glanced back at Maya and Willow, who were now both dozing, the baby's hand resting on the cub's fur. "I'd need to install monitoring equipment, and you'd have to follow strict protocols," she continued, seeming to think aloud. "Daily reports, supervised interactions only, and it would be temporary. A few weeks at most, until the cub can be safely integrated with others of its kind." Savannah and Connor exchanged a look. Concern, uncertainty, but also a shared sense that something important was happening here, something they couldn't simply turn away from. "We'll do it," Savannah said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Dr. West nodded slowly. "I'll need to make some calls. This is highly irregular, but then again, so is this entire situation." As she stepped outside to use her phone, Connor moved closer to Savannah, watching their daughter sleep peacefully beside the wild creature that had so unexpectedly entered their lives. "Are we crazy?" he whispered. "Taking in a bear?" Savannah leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Maybe. But Connor, what if this is happening for a reason? What if that mother bear somehow knew—" "Knew what?" he prompted when she trailed off. Savannah shook her head, unable to articulate the feeling that had been growing inside her since the moment the dying Grizzly had looked into her eyes. "I don't know exactly, but I think we're supposed to protect Willow, at least for now." Outside, the wind stirred the pines, carrying with it the wild scents of the forest. And somewhere in that wilderness, Savannah imagined, the spirit of a mother bear watched over them all. The learning curve days turned into weeks, and the temporary arrangement began to take on a sense of permanence. Dr. West visited every few days, always with the stated intention of assessing whether Willow was ready for the rehabilitation center, and always leaving with the same conclusion: not yet. The truth, though no one spoke it aloud, was that Willow was thriving in ways that defied explanation. The cub was growing steadily, learning to eat solid foods alongside Maya, who had just started on purees. Connor built a spacious enclosure that extended from the back of the cabin into the forest edge, giving Willow room to explore while keeping her safe. "She needs to develop natural behaviors," Dr. West instructed, showing Connor how to hide food throughout the enclosure to encourage foraging. "We can't let her forget she's a bear." But that was becoming increasingly difficult to remember. Willow seemed to understand human emotions with uncanny accuracy. When Maya cried, Willow would pace anxiously until the baby was soothed. When Savannah dropped a glass in the kitchen and cut her hand, Willow had appeared at the door, whimpering until Savannah showed her the bandaged wound. "It's as if she's trying to protect us," Savannah told Dr. West one afternoon, watching as Willow gently pushed a ball back to Maya, careful to use just enough strength to roll it, not enough to hurt. "Bears are intelligent," Dr. West replied, though her scientific detachment seemed increasingly forced. "And they can form strong bonds, especially when young." "But this is different," Savannah insisted. "You've seen it yourself. Dr. West sighed, closing her notebook. Yes, I've seen it. And no, I can't fully explain it. But Savannah, you need to remember, Willow will grow. She's adorable now, but in a year, she'll be powerful enough to cause serious harm, even unintentionally. The reminder sobered Savannah. She'd been so caught up in the miracle of their situation that she sometimes forgot the reality of what Willow would become. A wild predator weighing hundreds of pounds, with claws that could tear through flesh with ease. That evening, after Dr. West had gone, Savannah found Connor sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. She settled beside him, and they sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Dr. West is right, Connor said finally, about Willow growing. I've been reading everything I can find about grizzlies. She could reach 400 pounds as an adult female. Savannah nodded, leaning against his shoulder. I know, but that's still years away. Which means we need to decide what we're doing here, Connor continued, his voice gentle but firm. Is this still temporary? Do we really intend to send her to the rehabilitation center someday? I don't know, Savannah admitted. Every time I try to imagine it, I see Maya's face when Willow is gone. They've bonded so deeply, Connor. I know, but we need to think about what's best for Willow, too. She deserves a chance at a normal bear life. Finding a mate, having cubs of her own someday. A soft cry from inside interrupted their conversation. Maya waking from her nap. Through the open window, they heard Willow's responding whimper from her enclosure, alerting them that the baby needed attention. Savannah smiled sadly. When's the last time you heard of a normal bear life that included babysitting? Connor chuckled, but his eyes remained serious. We don't have to decide everything tonight. Let's just keep doing our best day by day. As weeks stretched into months, they fell into a rhythm. Connor continued his work as a freelance graphic designer, now with Willow often napping under his desk. Savannah, a botanist by training, began collecting data on Willow's development, creating detailed records that Dr. West eagerly incorporated into her research. Maya took her first steps with Willow hovering anxiously nearby, ready to cushion any falls. Willow learned to open the specially designed latch on her enclosure door, a development that should have alarmed them, but somehow didn't, as the cub only used her freedom to check on Maya during thunderstorms that frightened the baby. We're raising a wild animal, Connor remarked one night, watching Willow carefully carry one of Maya's toys back to its basket. No, Savannah corrected softly. We're raising a family, just not the kind we expected. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the forest in pristine white. Maya, now 14 months old and walking with confidence, pressed her face against the window in wonder, her breath fogging the glass. Beside her, Willow watched the falling flakes with equal fascination, now large enough that her head reached Maya's shoulder. Dr. West's visits had become less frequent, partly because the mountain roads were becoming treacherous, but also because Willow's case had evolved beyond simple rehabilitation. The wildlife biologist had published a preliminary paper on what she carefully termed extraordinary interspecies bonding behavior, attracting both excitement and skepticism from her colleagues. You understand that at some point, others will want to see Willow, she had warned during her last visit. The scientific community won't just take my word for this. The Reeds had nodded, but privately decided to cross that bridge when they came to it. For now, their unusual family remained their own precious secret, shared only with Dr. West and the 3 hunters who occasionally brought fish for Willow and stayed for Savannah's home-cooked meals. On this snow-kissed morning, Connor was preparing to drive into town for supplies before the roads worsened. Maya toddled after him, helping in her earnest, inefficient way to pack his bag. Dada home soon?" she declared, her language skills developing as rapidly as her confidence. "That's right, Princess," Connor smiled, kissing the top of her head. "I'll be home before dark. You be good for Mommy, okay? And make sure Willow stays out of trouble, too." At the sound of her name, the bear cub, though cub was becoming less accurate by the day, padded over and nudged Connor's hand with her nose. He scratched behind her ears, still sometimes marveling at how normal this had become. After Connor left, Savannah bundled Maya in her snowsuit and took her outside to experience her first proper snow. Willow followed, delighting in the cold powder, rolling and digging with obvious joy. Maya's laughter rang out as she threw handfuls of snow into the air, squealing when they fell back on her face. They were so absorbed in their play that none of them noticed the vehicle approaching until it was already pulling up beside Connor's empty parking spot. It wasn't Dr. West's familiar Jeep, but a large black SUV with tinted windows and government plates. Savannah's heart sank as two men in official-looking uniforms stepped out, followed by a woman in a sharp business suit. Willow immediately sensed her tension, moving to stand between the strangers and Maya with a low, warning rumble in her throat. "Mrs. Reed," the woman called, keeping a wary eye on Willow. "I'm Catherine Daniels from the State Wildlife Management Division. We need to speak with you about the bear cub you're harboring." Savannah scooped Maya into her arms, her mouth suddenly dry. "How did you—" "Dr. West's research paper caught our attention," Catherine replied, maintaining a safe distance. "While she didn't name you specifically, it wasn't difficult to connect the dots. May we come inside to discuss this?" Savannah nodded numbly, calling Willow to her side with a gentle command. The bear obeyed instantly, though her eyes never left the visitors. Inside the cabin, Catherine explained the situation with professional detachment. "Keeping a wild bear without proper authorization is illegal, Mrs. Reed, regardless of the unusual circumstances. Dr. West's temporary placement authorization wasn't properly filed, which puts both you and her in a difficult position." "What are you saying?" Savannah asked, though she already knew the answer. "We'll need to take the bear to a proper facility," one of the uniformed men stated. "Today." Maya, sensing the tension, clung to Willow's fur. The bear remained perfectly still, allowing the child to use her as support, but her dark eyes watched the officials with clear understanding. "You can't just take her," Savannah protested, fighting to keep her voice steady for Maya's sake. She's part of our family now, and she has a special bond with my daughter." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "I understand this is difficult, Mrs. Reed, but the law exists for good reason. Grizzly bears are wild animals, protected species. This one needs to be with its own kind, learning natural behaviors. She has a name," Savannah said quietly. "It's Willow, and she's learning everything she needs to know. Dr. West has documented all of it." "Dr. West's research is precisely why we're here," Catherine countered. "What you've done is remarkable, truly, but it doesn't change the fact that this arrangement isn't sustainable. The bear is growing rapidly. Within months, she could pose a significant danger, even unintentionally." As if to deliberately contradict this statement, Willow gently disentangled herself from Maya's grip and retreated to the corner of the room, sitting with perfect composure, her behavior more like that of a well-trained dog than a wild bear. The officials exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by Willow's obvious intelligence. "Look," Catherine said finally, "I can see this is unusual. I'm willing to give you a few days to prepare, to say goodbye, but by the end of the week we'll need to relocate the bear. It's non-negotiable." After they left, Savannah sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. Maya toddled over, patting her mother's cheek with concern. "Mama's sad," she observed solemnly. "Yes, baby," Savannah whispered. "Mama is sad." Willow approached cautiously, making the soft humming sound that had become her way of offering comfort. She pressed her warm body against Savannah's side, and Maya climbed into her mother's lap, creating a circle of shared warmth. "What are we going to do?" Savannah whispered more to herself than anyone else. But as she sat there, enveloped by her daughter and the bear who had so unexpectedly become part of their lives, an idea began to form. Desperate, perhaps even foolish, but the only option she could see. When Connor returned hours later, she was waiting for him with determined eyes and a plan that would change all their lives forever. "We need to leave," Savannah said, the moment Connor had stamped the snow from his boots. Her voice was calm but resolute, leaving no room for argument. Connor froze, grocery bags still in hand. "What happened?" Willow sat beside Savannah, unusually still, while Maya napped on the couch, exhausted from the morning's excitement and distress. "Wildlife officials came," Savannah explained, keeping her voice low to not wake Maya. "They're taking Willow at the end of the week. It's non-negotiable." Connor set down the bag slowly, processing her words. "Savannah, maybe this is for the best. We always knew this was temporary." "Did we?" she challenged, rising to face him. "Look me in the eye and tell me you're ready to let her go. Tell me you're prepared to explain to Maya why her best friend suddenly disappeared." Connor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course I'm not ready. I love her too, but we can't just— What are you suggesting, that we run?" "Yes," Savannah said simply. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." The word hung between them, impossible and wild. Connor stared at his wife, searching her face for signs that she wasn't serious. He found none. "Where would we even go?" he asked finally, his question itself an admission that he was considering the unthinkable. "My Uncle Daniel's cabin in British Columbia," Savannah answered promptly, revealing how much thought she'd already given this. "It's remote, hundreds of acres of wilderness, plenty of space for Willow to grow. He left it to me when he died last year, remember? We've never even visited it." "You want to leave everything, our home, our jobs, our lives, and move to Canada for a bear?" Connor's voice rose slightly, and Maya stirred on the couch. Willow immediately padded over to the child, positioning herself protectively beside the makeshift bed. The gesture wasn't lost on Connor. "Not just for a bear," Savannah said softly. "For our family. Connor, I know how crazy this sounds, but what's happening here, it's special. It's important. Willow isn't just some wild animal we rescued. She was given to us, entrusted to us, and Maya loves her like a sister." Connor paced the small living room, mind racing. "Even if we did this, and I'm not saying we should, we'd be breaking laws. International borders, endangered species. Savannah, we could end up in prison. Or," she countered, "we could be pioneering something incredible. What if Willow's case could change how we understand animal intelligence? What if Maya and Willow's bond could teach us something about coexistence we never knew was possible?" She moved closer, taking his hands in hers. "Connor, when we moved out here, we said we wanted Maya to grow up connected to nature, not separated from it. This is that connection, just not in the way we expected." Connor looked past her to where Maya was now awake, groggily patting Willow's head as the bear watched over her. The image was so natural, so right, that it made his throat tighten. "We'd need to plan carefully," he said finally, the words coming slowly as if he couldn't quite believe he was saying them. "I can work remotely from anywhere. We'd need to pack only essentials, leave before the officials return. Savannah's face brightened with hope. "So, you're saying yes?" "I'm saying I'm terrified," he admitted. "But I'm more terrified of what happens if we do nothing, if we let them take her." That night, after Maya was asleep, they spread maps across the kitchen table, planning their route north. The cabin in British Columbia was deep in the wilderness, accessible only by a logging road for the last 20 miles. It would be a hard journey in winter, especially with a growing bear and a toddler, but not impossible. "We tell no one," Connor insisted. "Not even Dr. West. She's already in trouble because of us." Savannah nodded, tracing the route with her finger. "We'll need supplies, medical kits, extra food, emergency equipment, and we'll need to build a transport crate for Willow," Connor added. "Something comfortable but secure, just in case we run into anyone." They worked late into the night, transforming their desperate idea into a feasible plan. As dawn broke, they stood together at the window, watching the rising sun paint the snow-covered mountains pink. "Is this insanity?" Connor whispered. Savannah leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Maybe, but sometimes the right thing looks like insanity to everyone else." In the corner, Willow slept, curled around Maya's favorite stuffed animal, her breathing deep and regular. In 2 days' time they would be gone, leaving behind the life they had known, venturing into an uncertain future, all for the love of a child and the bear who had been entrusted to her. As terrifying as it was, Savannah couldn't deny the rightness of their decision. Somewhere in the great beyond, she believed, a mother bear was watching over them still, guiding them toward a destiny none of them could have imagined. They left before dawn 2 days later, the truck packed with only their most essential belongings. Connor had built a large crate for Willow that occupied most of the truck bed, covered with a tarp to shield her from both the elements and prying eyes. They'd spent hours getting her accustomed to it, making it comfortable with Maya's blankets and toys so the bear would associate it with safety rather than confinement. "It's an adventure," Savannah told Maya as they settled her into her car seat. "We're going to a beautiful new home in the mountains, where Willow can have forests to explore, and you can both grow up together." Maya nodded solemnly, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. At 20 months old, she couldn't fully understand what was happening, but she sensed the importance and responded to her parents' mixture of tension and excitement. "Willow come too," she stated, not a question but a confirmation. "Yes, sweetheart," Savannah assured her, tucking a blanket around her legs. "Willow is coming too. She's right behind us in her special house." As Connor pulled away from the cabin, their home for the past 3 years, Savannah fought back tears. They weren't just leaving a building, they were leaving their planned life, their security, everything familiar. All for a wild creature that had somehow become as essential to them as the air they breathed. The first day of travel passed without incident. They stuck to back roads where possible, avoiding major highways and border crossings. Connor had mapped a route through remote areas where a tarp-covered truck bed would draw minimal attention. They took turns driving, stopping only when necessary for fuel or to check on Willow. The bear remained remarkably calm, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. When they stopped in a secluded area to let her stretch her legs, she stayed close, glancing often at the road as if watching for danger. "She knows," Savannah whispered to Connor as they watched Willow gently play with Maya in a snowy clearing. "Somehow, she understands what we're doing for her." Connor nodded, his earlier doubts increasingly difficult to maintain in the face of Willow's obvious intelligence. "We need to reach the border crossing before midnight. The guard I researched works the night shift, and according to the forums, he rarely does vehicle inspections. Their plan was risky, crossing at a remote checkpoint with minimal staffing during the quietest hours, with their most important cargo hidden under blankets and tarps. They had created false documentation, showing they were transporting research equipment to the University of British Columbia, in case anyone asked about the large crate. As they approached the border that night, Maya slept peacefully in her car seat, and Willow remained silent in her crate, as if sensing the need for absolute quiet. Savannah's hands trembled slightly as she handed their passports to the sleepy-eyed guard. "Purpose of your visit to Canada?" he asked, stifling a yawn. "Family retreat," Connor answered, the rehearsed line coming easily. "My wife inherited a cabin in the mountains. We're taking some time away, maybe do some writing." The guard glanced at the tarp-covered truck bed. He squinted in the dim light, his flashlight suddenly sweeping across the vehicle. "What's under the tarp?" he asked, his voice sharper now, more alert. Savannah's heart hammered against her ribs. They had rehearsed this moment, but facing it was entirely different. "Research equipment," Connor replied smoothly, handing over the forged university documents. "My wife is a botanist. We're bringing some specialized gear to study plant adaptations in extreme cold." The guard studied the papers, his expression unreadable. "Pretty big equipment." "Environmental chambers," Savannah chimed in, the technical term coming easily from her actual research days. "They're bulky, but essential for controlling temperature variables." The guard nodded slowly, then walked around to the back of the truck. Savannah and Connor exchanged panicked glances. This wasn't part of the plan. Willow had been remarkably quiet, but a direct inspection would reveal everything. As the guard reached for the edge of the tarp, a loud crackle burst from his radio. "Jenkins, we've got a situation at Checkpoint 2. Need backup immediately." The guard hesitated, hand still on the tarp. For one agonizing moment, Savannah thought he would ignore the call and continue his inspection. Then, with a sigh, he dropped the tarp edge. "You folks drive carefully," he said, handing back their documents. "Roads are icy up north." Connor managed a thanks that sounded almost natural, and they drove through the checkpoint, neither speaking until they were miles beyond the border. "That was too close," Savannah whispered finally, her voice shaking. "If that radio hadn't—" "But it did," Connor interrupted gently, reaching for her hand. "We made it, Sav. We're in Canada." The relief was short-lived. The logging road to Uncle Daniel's cabin proved more challenging than expected. 3 days of travel had turned into 5, as winter storms forced them to wait out blizzard conditions in small motels, keeping Willow hidden in the truck under the pretense of guarding their valuable equipment. By the 6th day, both their nerves and supplies were wearing thin. Maya had been remarkably patient, but even she was growing restless in the confines of the truck. Willow, now approaching the size of a large dog, was increasingly difficult to keep concealed. "Should be just beyond this ridge," Connor said, squinting through the windshield at the snow-covered landscape. The logging road had dwindled to little more than a trail, winding through dense pine forest. According to the coordinates, we're less than 5 miles from the cabin. Those 5 miles took nearly 3 hours to navigate. Twice they had to stop to clear fallen branches from their path. Once, the truck became stuck in a snowdrift, and it took all of Connor's ingenuity with chains and branches to free them. When they finally rounded a bend and saw the cabin emerge from the trees, Savannah burst into tears of relief. It was larger than she'd expected, a substantial 2-story structure of weathered logs with a stone chimney, nestled in a clearing beside a frozen lake. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing roof, explaining how Uncle Daniel had maintained electricity in such a remote location. "Home," she whispered to Maya, who had awakened from a nap. Our new home. They released Willow from her crate immediately. The young bear bounded into the knee-deep snow, rolling and digging with unbridled joy after days of confinement. Maya's delighted laughter joined Willow's happy grunts, the sounds echoing across the frozen landscape. The cabin itself was dusty but sound, furnished with rustic but comfortable pieces carved by Uncle Daniel himself. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main living area, with plenty of split wood stacked nearby. The kitchen was simple but functional, with propane-powered appliances and hand-pumped water from a well. Solar batteries provided limited electricity, enough for basic lighting and communication devices. "It's perfect," Savannah said, standing in the center of the main room, turning slowly to take it all in. "Isolated, sustainable, room for all of us to grow." Connor nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "It's a good start, but we need to be realistic about what we've done, Sav. We've essentially gone off the grid with an endangered species. If we're found, we won't be," she insisted, unpacking supplies with brisk efficiency. "The nearest town is 40 miles away. Uncle Daniel lived here for 20 years without trouble. We can do the same." That night, exhausted but relieved, they sat before the crackling fire. Maya had fallen asleep on a bearskin rug, an irony not lost on either of them, with Willow curled protectively beside her. The bear's rhythmic breathing synchronized with the child's, creating a harmony that seemed to underscore the rightness of their desperate choice. "What now?" Connor asked softly, not wanting to disturb the sleeping pair. Savannah leaned against his shoulder, watching the flames. "Now, we build a life here. Not just surviving, but thriving. Creating something new." As if the universe were answering her declaration, the cabin's ancient radio crackled to life, startling them both. They had noticed it earlier, a ham radio set up in the corner, dusty with disuse, but hadn't attempted to operate it. "Hello?" A voice emerged through static. "Daniel? Are you there? Over." Connor and Savannah froze, staring at each other in alarm. Then Connor moved cautiously toward the radio, lifting the handset. "Hello?" He responded tentatively. "This isn't Daniel. Who am I speaking with?" A pause, then, "Name's Elijah Hawkins." "I'm looking for Daniel Reed. This is his frequency. Who are you?" "Over." Connor hesitated, looking to Savannah for guidance. She nodded slightly, a silent agreement to partial honesty. "I'm Connor Reed. Daniel was my wife's uncle. He passed away last year. We've just arrived at his cabin." "Over." Another pause, longer this time. Then Elijah's voice returned, softer now. "I'm sorry to hear that. Daniel was a good man, a good neighbor. I live about 10 miles west of you, over the ridge. Been checking his frequency every few months, just in case. Didn't know he had family coming up." "Over." "It was a sudden decision," Connor replied carefully. "We needed a change. Over." "Well," Elijah said, "these mountains have a way of giving folks what they need, even if it's not what they expected. Listen, weather report says there's another storm coming in tomorrow night. Big one. You folks got everything you need to hunker down." "Over." Connor glanced around the cabin, mentally inventorying their supplies. "We should be okay. We brought essentials. Over." "Good, but just in case, I'll stop by tomorrow morning. Bring you some extra supplies, help you get that generator running proper if you haven't figured it out yet. Daniel would have wanted me to look after his kin." "Over." Panic flashed across Savannah's face. A visitor, so soon, with Willow impossible to hide or explain. "That's very kind," Connor said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "But we wouldn't want to put you out. The roads are pretty bad. Over." Elijah chuckled, the sound crackling through the speaker. Roads? Son, I don't use roads up here. I'll come by snowmobile. Been making that trip to check on Daniel for 15 years. See you around 10, over and out. The radio went silent, leaving Connor and Savannah staring at each other in dismay. What do we do? Savannah whispered, glancing at Willow's sleeping form. We can't hide her in the truck again. She's too restless after days of confinement. And we can't risk turning away help if that storm is as bad as he says. Connor ran a hand through his hair, thinking rapidly. Maybe we tell him the truth. We're part of it. Are you crazy? We just met this man through a radio. He could report us. Think about it, Sav. He was Daniel's friend for years. He lives completely off-grid, probably by choice. He might be more understanding than we expect. Savannah shook her head, unconvinced. It's too risky. Willow isn't just a pet we brought illegally. She's an endangered species. If the wrong people find out. Then what do you suggest? Connor asked, frustration edging his voice. Because, unless you want to take her into the forest for the day and hope she doesn't freeze or wander off, we don't have many options. They debated well into the night, their whispers growing more urgent as exhaustion and stress took their toll. In the end, they decided on a compromise. They would introduce Willow as a special research subject, a rescued cub part of a sanctioned study on bear-human interactions. They would show Elijah the careful records Savannah had kept, the monitoring equipment Dr. West had installed. It wasn't the whole truth, but perhaps enough of it to be believable. Morning came too quickly, gray light filtering through frost-covered windows. They had barely settled into the cabin, and already their secret was at risk. Savannah prepared a simple breakfast, while Connor cleared snow from the cabin's entrance, both moving with the heavy awareness that everything could change with their visitor's arrival. At precisely 10 o'clock, they heard the distant whine of a snowmobile engine. Willow, now fully awake and playing with Maya near the fire, raised her head alertly, sensing the approaching stranger. Savannah knelt beside the bear, stroking her thick fur. It's going to be okay, she murmured, trying to convince herself as much as Willow. Just stay calm. The snowmobile engine cut off, followed by the crunch of boots on snow. Then 3 sharp knocks on the cabin door. Connor opened it to reveal a tall, lean man with a silver beard and weathered skin that spoke of decades in the wilderness. He wore practical layers of wool and canvas, with a rifle slung across his back. Standard equipment, not threatening, but a reminder of the realities of mountain life. Elijah Hawkins, he said simply, extending a gloved hand. Welcome to the back of beyond. Connor Reed, Connor replied, shaking the offered hand. Thank you for coming. This is my wife, Savannah. Elijah stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. His eyes, sharp and observant, took in the cabin's interior before settling on the scene by the fireplace. Maya sitting on the floor, and beside her, unmistakably, a young grizzly bear. The old man went completely still. No one spoke. Maya, oblivious to the tension, continued stacking wooden blocks that Uncle Daniel had carved years ago. Willow watched the stranger warily but made no aggressive move. Well, Elijah said finally, his voice remarkably calm. Daniel always said life had a way of surprising him. Guess that trait runs in the family. Elijah Hawkins stood motionless in the cabin doorway, his weathered face revealing nothing as he studied the young grizzly bear sitting calmly beside Maya. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring, broken only by the soft pop and crackle of the fire. I should probably close this door, he said finally, doing so with deliberate slowness, unless you folks are expecting more company. Connor found his voice first. Mr. Hawkins, Elijah, the older man corrected mildly. Elijah, Connor amended. We can explain. I expect you can, Elijah agreed, removing his gloves and hat but making no move toward the bear or child. And I expect it's quite a story. Savannah stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between the visitor and the unlikely pair by the fire. It is. But before we tell it, I need to know if we can trust you. A smile creased Elijah's wind-burned face. Young lady, up here, trust isn't optional, it's survival. Daniel understood that. We looked out for each other for 15 years without fail. He gestured to the bear with a nod. Besides, I suspect if you're harboring a grizzly in your living room, you've already made some hard choices. I'm not here to complicate them. Something in his steady gaze convinced Savannah. She relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained vigilant. Please, sit down. Would you like some coffee? Wouldn't say no, Elijah replied, choosing a chair that gave him a clear view of Willow. That's a young female, isn't she? Not yet a year old, I'd guess. Connor blinked in surprise. You know bears? Been living alongside them most of my life, Elijah said, accepting the steaming mug Savannah offered. Shot a few when I had to, observed many more. Never seen one playing blocks with a toddler, though. He took a thoughtful sip. Daniel would have loved this. Maya, finally noticing the focus on her playmate, looked up with a bright smile. Willow, my friend, she announced proudly. Willow, eh? Elijah nodded, as if this were perfectly reasonable. Good, strong name. Daniel named every creature on his trapline. Did you know that? Said it reminded him they weren't just resources, but neighbors. Encouraged by his calm reception, Savannah and Connor took turns telling their extraordinary story. The dying mother bear's desperate act, Maya and Willow's inexplicable bond, the wildlife officials' intervention, and their desperate flight north. Elijah listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. When they finished, he set down his empty mug and leaned back in his chair. Life sure does have its strange turns, he said finally. Can't say I blame you for what you did, though I wouldn't have dared it myself. Are you going to report us? Savannah asked directly. Elijah actually chuckled. To who? The nearest ranger station is 100 miles from here, and Pete Lansing, who runs it, has been officially checking this area for 15 years, without ever actually making the trip. His expression grew more serious. But you should know what you're facing. Winter up here isn't like what you knew in Montana. It's deeper, darker, longer. And that bear, Willow, she's going to grow, fast. We know, Connor said, glancing at the bear, who was now dozing beside Maya. We've been preparing as best we can, reading everything available about grizzlies. Books are fine, Elijah said, but they don't tell you everything. Like how to bear-proof your food storage, or what to do when she grows too large for the cabin. He paused, studying them with renewed intensity. You're committed to this? To raising her? Yes, Savannah said without hesitation. For as long as she needs us. Elijah nodded slowly. Then you'll need help. Proper help, from someone who understands both bears and these mountains. He stood, moving to the window to gaze out at the snow-covered landscape. I've lived here 40 years. Came to get away from people, to find peace in the wilderness. Never expected to become a consultant on bear raising, but then again, never expected a lot of things life threw my way. He turned back to face them, his decision apparently made. I'll help you, show you how to survive up here, how to give Willow what she needs as she grows. In return, he hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his weathered features. In return, I'd like to be part of this. Whatever this is, it's special, important maybe. Savannah felt tears prick her eyes, the relief of finding an ally overwhelming after days of isolation and fear. "We'd be grateful," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet," Elijah warned, though his eyes were kind. "That storm I mentioned is coming fast. We've got work to do before it hits if you want to stay warm and safe." He gestured to their supplies. "What you've got might have been enough for a normal family, but with a growing bear to feed and a proper Canadian winter bearing down, we need to prepare." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Elijah proved invaluable, showing Connor how to properly operate the backup generator, identifying weaknesses in the cabin's insulation, and helping reinforce the doors and windows against the coming blizzard. He examined their food supplies with a critical eye, declaring them barely adequate before producing additional provisions from his snowmobile's storage compartment: smoked fish, dried berries, and cured meat. Most surprisingly, he showed no fear of Willow, approaching the young bear with respectful caution but evident interest. Willow, for her part, seemed to accept him almost immediately, allowing him to examine her paws and teeth with professional detachment. "She's healthy," he pronounced after his inspection. "Good muscle tone, clear eyes. You've done well by her so far." He scratched behind her ears, earning a contented grumble. "But she'll need more space as she grows, and a more varied diet. Bears aren't meant to live entirely indoors." "We know," Savannah said. "We're planning to build an enclosure connecting to the cabin. Something that gives her freedom, but keeps her safe." Elijah nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. I can help with that come spring, for now, though." He glanced out the window at the darkening sky. "I'd best get back before this storm hits full force. Wouldn't want to impose on your first night in your new home." Despite their protests that he was welcome to stay, Elijah insisted on returning to his own cabin. "Been weathering these storms alone for decades," he said, donning his cold-weather gear. "Besides, you folks need time to settle in, find your rhythm here. I'll check on you in a few days, once the worst has passed." At the door, he paused, looking back at Maya and Willow, now both dozing by the fire. "What you're doing isn't conventional," he said softly. "Some would call it foolish, even dangerous. But from what I've seen today, there's something right about it too. Something healing." After Elijah left, Connor and Savannah stood together at the window, watching his snowmobile's lights disappear into the swirling snow. "Did that really just happen?" Connor asked, his voice hushed with disbelief. "Did we really just find the one person in these mountains who not only doesn't report us but actually offers to help?" Savannah leaned against him, suddenly exhausted but deeply relieved. "Maybe the universe is making up for everything else it's thrown at us lately." The storm arrived with full force that night, howling around the cabin like a living thing. Wind rattled the windows, and snow piled high against the doors. But inside, warmed by the blazing fire and Elijah's unexpected friendship, the small family felt secure for the first time in days. As January gave way to February, they settled into a routine shaped by the rhythm of mountain life and the needs of their unusual household. Connor set up his design studio in a corner of the main room, connecting remotely to clients using a satellite internet system Uncle Daniel had installed. Savannah continued her research, documenting Willow's development and behavior with scientific precision while also exploring the surrounding forest for botanical specimens during breaks in the weather. Elijah proved true to his word, visiting regularly to offer guidance and assistance. He showed Connor how to split wood efficiently, taught Savannah about edible plants that would emerge in spring, and helped them design an expandable enclosure for Willow that would eventually give her access to several acres of forest while keeping her connected to the cabin. Most valuably, he shared his knowledge of bears, accumulated through decades of observation. Grizzlies aren't the mindless killers people make them out to be, he explained one evening, as they watched Willow carefully carrying Maya's toys back to their basket, one by one. They're intelligent, adaptable, with complex social structures we're only beginning to understand. Then why are you not more surprised by Willow's behavior? Savannah asked, noting how the bear waited patiently for Maya to finish with each toy before returning it. Doesn't this seem extraordinary to you? Elijah considered the question, stroking his silver beard thoughtfully. Extraordinary, yes. Impossible, no. Animals adopt orphans from other species sometimes, even predators caring for natural prey. Nature has more exceptions than rules, I've found. He gestured to Willow. But what's happening here goes beyond adoption. It's like she's trying to be part of your human family, learning your ways. Dr. West, our wildlife biologist friend, said something similar, Connor remarked. Before we left, she was comparing Willow's behavior to historical accounts of liminal animals that seem to exist between wild and domestic. Smart woman, Elijah nodded. The old cultures had better words for this. Spirit animals, shapeshifters, beings that cross boundaries. Modern science doesn't like those gray areas much. As winter deepened, Willow continued to grow at a remarkable rate. By March, she weighed over 100 pounds, her frame filling out with adolescent awkwardness that sometimes led to comical accidents as she misjudged her size in the cabin's confined space. Yet, despite her increasing strength, she remained extraordinarily gentle with Maya, adapting her play to the child's fragility with uncanny awareness. Maya, too, was developing rapidly. Her vocabulary expanded daily, and she demonstrated an intuitive understanding of Willow's needs and moods that sometimes left the adults watching in amazement. "Willow hungry," she would announce before the bear showed any obvious signs, or "Willow sad today," on occasions when the bear seemed unusually subdued. "They communicate somehow," Savannah told Elijah during one of his visits. "Not with words, obviously, but there's something deeper happening." Elijah, who had been teaching Maya to identify animal tracks in the snow, nodded thoughtfully. "Children haven't learned all our artificial barriers yet. They're still connected to the older ways of knowing." He watched as Maya and Willow examined a rabbit trail together, the child pointing excitedly while the bear snuffled at the scent. Whatever it is, it's beautiful to witness. Their peaceful routine was shattered one April morning when the cabin's radio crackled to life with unusual urgency. Connor answered to find Elijah's voice, tense and hurried. "Connor, you there? Over." "I'm here, Elijah. What's wrong?" "Over." "Helicopter flew over my place 20 minutes ago, heading your direction. Government markings. Over." Connor's blood turned to ice. "Are you sure?" "Over. Positive. Fish and Wildlife Service. They don't come up here unless they're looking for something specific, or someone." "Over." Savannah had appeared at Connor's side, her face draining of color as she listened. "How would they find us?" she whispered. Connor shook his head, struggling to think clearly through sudden panic. "Elijah, what should we do?" "Over. Get Willow out of sight for starters. If they land and approach the cabin, you're just a family who moved to Uncle Daniel's place. Nothing unusual. I'm on my way to you now." "Over." "Roger that. Thanks for the warning. Over and out." They moved with practiced efficiency born of months preparing for this possibility. Connor grabbed emergency packs they kept ready while Savannah helped Maya into warm clothes. Willow, sensing their anxiety, followed close behind, unusually subdued. "We'll take the emergency tunnel," Connor said, referring to a passage Uncle Daniel had built leading from the cabin's cellar to a small shelter about 50 yards into the forest, originally designed as a refuge from wildfire. "Stay there until we know what's happening." They had barely disappeared into the tunnel when the distinctive thump of helicopter blades became audible overhead. Through the bunker's small periscope, Connor watched as a black helicopter circled the clearing twice before landing in the open area beside the frozen lake. 2 uniformed officers emerged, followed by a figure Connor recognized with a shock. Dr. Eleanor West, the wildlife biologist who had helped them care for Willow in Montana. "Dr. West is with them," he whispered to Savannah, who was keeping Maya and Willow quiet in the back of the shelter. "How would she know to look here?" "Maybe she doesn't," Savannah suggested, though her voice betrayed her doubt. "Maybe it's a routine inspection." They watched tensely as the officers approached the cabin, knocked loudly, then tried the door. Finding it unlocked, they'd had no time to secure it, the group entered. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited, Maya quietly singing to Willow to keep the bear calm. Finally, the group emerged, looking frustrated. They appeared to be debating something, gesturing toward the surrounding forest, and then back to the cabin. One officer pulled out a satellite phone while Dr. West knelt to examine something in the snow near the woodpile. "Tracks," Connor realized aloud. "Willow's tracks in the fresh snow, and they lead right to—" He didn't finish the sentence. The officer with the phone was now pointing directly toward their hiding place, having apparently received coordinates or instructions. Dr. West and the second officer began walking purposefully in their direction. "They know," Savannah whispered, pulling Maya closer. "Someone told them exactly where to look." Connor closed the periscope, turning to face his family in the dimly lit shelter. Willow pressed against Savannah's side, her dark eyes reflecting the fear she sensed in her human companions. "What do we do?" Savannah asked, her voice steadier than Connor expected. "Run deeper into the forest?" Connor shook his head. "It's too risky with Maya, and they'd just track us. Besides," he glanced at Willow, who now weighed over 150 pounds, "I don't think we can outrun a helicopter." "Then we stand our ground," Savannah decided, rising to her feet. "We tell them the truth, all of it. What the mother bear did, what we've observed, everything we've learned." "And if they still want to take Willow?" Connor asked, the question they'd been avoiding for months. Savannah's jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to take us too." Before Connor could respond, they heard voices approaching the shelter entrance. Maya looked up at her parents, her small face solemn with understanding beyond her years. "Need to be brave?" she asked simply. "Yes, sweetheart," Savannah answered, blinking back tears. "We all need to be very brave now." The shelter door opened, letting in a flood of bright spring sunlight. Dr. West stood there, flanked by the 2 uniformed officers, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene before her. The family huddled together, and beside them, the young grizzly bear who should have been impossible to domesticate. "Hello, Savannah, Connor," she said quietly. "It's been a while." Light flooded the small shelter as Dr. Eleanor West stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed against the bright spring sky. Behind her, the 2 fish and wildlife officers shifted nervously, hands hovering near their tranquilizer guns at the sight of Willow. "Dr. West," Savannah acknowledged, her arm protectively around Maya. "You've come a long way to find us." The wildlife biologist stepped into the shelter, her eyes immediately drawn to Willow. The bear, now the size of a large Saint Bernard, remained calm beside Maya, though her ears flicked forward attentively. "She's almost doubled in size," Dr. West remarked professionally, though a hint of awe crept into her voice. "Her coat is excellent. Muscle development appears optimal." Her gaze shifted to the reeds. "You've taken good care of her." "We've tried," Connor said cautiously, still uncertain of Dr. West's intentions. "Why are you here? How did you find us?" Dr. West signaled the officers to wait outside, a small relief in the tense situation. Once they'd stepped away, she sighed heavily. "When you disappeared with Willow, it caused quite a stir. The Wildlife Division wanted to press charges immediately, endangering a protected species, interstate transport of wildlife, crossing international boundaries with an endangered animal." "We did what we had to do," Savannah interrupted firmly. "They were going to take her." "I know," Dr. West nodded. "And I suspected you might come here. Savannah mentioned her uncle's remote cabin once during our conversations. When the authorities started pressuring me for information about possible locations, I redirected them elsewhere for months." Connor and Savannah exchanged surprised glances. "Then why are you here now?" Connor asked. Dr. West's professional demeanor slipped, revealing genuine concern. "Because I couldn't keep them off your trail forever. Someone at the border checkpoint eventually remembered your crossing, and once they had that lead, it was only a matter of time." She knelt down, bringing herself to Maya's eye level. "Hello, Maya. Do you remember me?" The child nodded solemnly. "Doctor for Willow," she said, one hand still resting on the bear's fur. "That's right, Doctor." West smiled briefly before returning her attention to the adults. "I convinced them to let me come along. Argued that I had the best chance of safely handling the bear if we found her. I wanted to warn you before they took action." "Warn us?" Savannah repeated. "What kind of action?" Dr. West stood, brushing dust from her knees. "Standard procedure would be to tranquilize the bear, remove it to a rehabilitation facility, and arrest you for multiple wildlife violations." Seeing their expressions, she quickly added, "But I'm hoping we can find an alternative solution." "There is no alternative," Savannah stated firmly. "Willow stays with us, with Maya." Dr. West shook her head. "It's not that simple, and you know it. Willow is growing rapidly. Within months, she'll be too large for even this remote cabin. Within a year, she'll reach her adolescent phase, unpredictable, potentially aggressive." "She's not like other bears," Connor argued. "You've seen it yourself, her intelligence, her bond with Maya." "I have seen it, Doctor," West agreed, "and it's remarkable. Unlike anything documented in scientific literature. That's partly why I'm here." She took a deep breath. "I've proposed a research study, an official, sanctioned observation of Willow's development and her relationship with your family." Savannah narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "What exactly would that mean?" "It would mean you could stay here, keep Willow under certain conditions," Dr. West explained. "Regular monitoring, proper enclosures built to specification, safety protocols, and complete documentation of everything. Her growth, behaviors, interactions. It would be unprecedented research into ursine cognitive development and interspecies bonding." "And the alternative?" Connor asked quietly. Dr. West's expression hardened slightly. "The officers outside have tranquilizers and a transport cage in the helicopter. They have federal warrants for your arrest and authority to take Willow into protective custody. I've convinced them to give me time to speak with you first, but they're prepared to act if necessary." The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Willow, sensing the tension, moved closer to Maya, a low rumble building in her chest. Not threatening, but protective. Look at them, Savannah said softly, gesturing to the child and bear. You've studied wild animals your entire career. Have you ever seen anything like this bond? This understanding between species? Dr. West's scientific detachment wavered as she observed Maya gently stroking Willow's head, the bear's eyes half closed in contentment, despite the stressful situation. No, she admitted. I haven't. It defies conventional understanding. Then help us protect it, Connor urged, not just for Willow's sake or ours, but for what it might teach us about coexistence, about bonds beyond our biological boundaries. The biologist seemed torn, glancing back at the officers waiting outside. The research proposal is genuine. It could provide legal protection for your situation while advancing our understanding of bear cognition and behavior. But it would mean oversight, regular visitors, documentation. Your privacy would be significantly reduced. Will they separate Willow from Maya? Savannah asked directly. Dr. West hesitated. Not initially, no. The entire premise of the study would be observing their existing bond. And in the future, Connor pressed. I can't make guarantees beyond the scope of the initial study, Dr. West admitted. But I would do everything in my power to keep them together as long as it's safe and beneficial for both. Before they could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the shelter's entrance, they could see one of the officers arguing with someone just out of view. Then Elijah Hawkins stepped into sight, his rifle slung across his back, expression stormy beneath his silver beard. These folks are under my protection, he was saying firmly to the flustered officer, and you're trespassing on private land without proper notification. Dr. West stepped outside quickly. Mr. Hawkins, I presume? I'm Dr. Eleanor West, wildlife biologist. We're here on official business regarding a protected species. I know why you're here, Elijah replied gruffly. And I know what that family in there has been doing. Been helping them for months now. He tapped his temple. Got eyes all over these mountains. Saw your helicopter coming before you cleared the South Ridge. This new complication clearly caught Dr. West by surprise. You've been assisting them, building proper enclosures, teaching them how to care for a growing bear, making sure they're respecting the wildness in her while keeping everyone safe, Elijah confirmed. I've been living alongside grizzlies for 40 years, Doctor. Know them better than most, with fancy degrees. Connor and Savannah had emerged from the shelter. Maya held securely in Savannah's arms, while Willow stood alertly beside them. The scene was tense, but not hostile, a negotiation poised on a knife's edge. Dr. West surveyed the unlikely group thoughtfully. What if,